Southbound National Park Center.
There you go.
Mark, you've done marked up.
Let's go. All right, we will call this meeting of the Budget Committee for the Port of Hood River to order. Thank you, everybody, for joining. The first order of business today, President Bent, is for you guys to elect a president and secretary of the Budget Committee. And so what we will need is a motion from you for each of those positions, and anybody on the Budget Committee can make those motions.
One, was it John again or Larry?
I thought this would be a great chance for Brian.
Oh, Brian, yeah, that's good,
Just pay.
Brian.
Wait.
That'd be good, yes. That'd be good. I forgot, Brian.
I'm not sure I was listening correctly.
Wait,
Let's see.
We need a president.
Sure enough, you haven't done that.
that
for a
would be
while.
good.
We can make it.
I move that we put Brian in there.
Subject to you guys all being here again next year.
No, that has nothing to do with it.
That's fine. I'll vote for myself. You need a second.
You do.
I didn't even make any motions at all. My president left over from last year. Is that what you're talking about?
About 2 more minutes, it sounds like, but you guys need a motion and a second. After you got to vote on it.
All those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Now you need a secretary.
So just to be clear, the motion was by Larry and the second was by
Judy.
Judy.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes, Judy second.
Okay, so we need a motion for a secretary.
Judy,
um,
I named my Judy. She did such a
you know,
great job.
I'm hoping I'm gonna be on the road next year.
Oh,
I kind of been trying to just, I would love to be involved, but I just don't want to take on I think I'm gonna be traveling. I'm free now.
okay. John, would you like to be?
I don't care. Makes no difference.
I
to me.
nominate John. Then,
It'd be fine.
I'll
Second.
that.
second.
Brian, second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Wow.
And then John,
Dan?
you get an opportunity if you want to allow staff, you want to allow staff to actually take.
Of course.
Brian, do you have the agenda?
I do.
Okay, then I'm going to pass this down to you, and you can take it from there.
Oh,
Just stated.
I get the pear? Oh, it's an apple. I'll think of
You
the
guys
pear.
actually do have to say out loud that you would like a staff person to take the minutes instead of the secretary.
Yes. I was about
You
ready.
would like
You're the,
So I'll make that recommendation that staff members take the minutes
yeah.
on behalf of the budget committee. Does that have a motion?
Nope.
Okay.
No, you just direct.
Directed, okay. So we've done that, and item 3 is the budget message from Michael McElway, Executive Director.
You, President Short. So my role as budget officer for the budget committee this year. Let me just start out by saying thank you to all you budget committee members, and I see Becca there. Thank you for participating. It's a really important part of our budget preparation effort to have input from the public in the form of your budget committee members. And I also want to say thank you to Fred. Fred is officially retired at the end of December, and he was willing to help us out in preparation of this budget. It's a lot of work that goes into this, and he was able to help us out, and I'm grateful for that. So the first part of the budget message just goes through the process. This is an important step. We really start our budget preparation in January. This step today is when you'll review the budget, and Fred will go over it in detail, and then you will suggest any modifications or changes to it as the committee. So during this meeting here, each budget committee member has the same vote, the same representation as any commissioner. Now, you will then adopt or recommend that the approved budget. And then that will go to, once done, it'll go to a public meeting in July. We always include in our budget message overview of our budget. There's the general fund, the revenue fund, and the bridge repair and replacement fund. We're an enterprise based organization. Most of our activities are enterprises, whether it's tolling or whether it's leased property. We have very limited property taxes to go to the port. In fact, it's about 0.5% of our total budget. So we're an organization that is based on the enterprise functions that we carry out. We always review quickly the financial policies, and the two most important are the amount in assigned reserve that should not go below 10% of our net depreciable assets. That's listed on your second page. And then our debt service coverage ratio shall equal or exceed 2.0, and that's really not an issue now because we have very limited debt. I want to give you a couple of highlights to the budget. The first is that in the budget, we have proposed a new reserve fund. This would be the bridge replacement reserve fund. So it's a separate and distinct reserve fund that would accumulate funds specifically and only for the bridge replacement. That's an important, even though I mentioned 3 funds, this would be a proposed 4th that would, if the budget is approved, would be or would be included in our budget going forward.
Michael, excuse me, is that a capital fund?
Well, it could be any activity that's related to bridge replacement, primarily capital, also materials and services. In terms of kind of overall points, COVID had a big impact on this agency as well as a lot of other agencies. We think we're mostly through that, and to the extent that we're not, it really accrues to what expectations we have for increased maintenance costs and to some extent staffing costs related to our recreational property. So that's a relief given what we've just gone through, and I know everyone has. Another common theme through this budget is long-term fiscal sustainability. You will see in many places in the budget how we are trying to address the looming challenge, which is that at some point the current bridge goes away and bridge replacement or bridge revenue is not available to backstop our other activities. And then I mentioned the new revenue fund that would be, at least in the proposed budget, and go along with the toll increase that would, at least from planning and budgeting purposes, would commence in January of 2023. So I just say, if there are any questions as I move through this, I'm going to try to move it pretty quickly. You have the written materials in your packet, but stop me if there's any clarification. Industrial commercial properties are really big part of our portfolio. Our vacancy rates have gone down some, but not significantly. We were frankly a little bit surprised that we've gone through the COVID time without a significant drop in vacancy. It is down a little. We do have some vacancies in some properties. Building maintenance is referenced here. It's a big part of what we do. We have a portfolio that includes several older buildings, so we need to be on top of that. And there's allocations made, budget allocations made for the Jensen building and in the DMV building. And then we also have allocated funds or budgeted funds for a comprehensive building inspection. I mentioned the Lower Mill site in here because that's an important asset the port has, and we've worked for several years on not only acquisition, but cleanup and then creating the infrastructure needed to make it shovel ready. It's mostly shovel ready, but not, there's one lot that has a wetland project that needs to be done. The issue there is that in our 10-year financial model, we have been assuming that we will be selling those lots, or at least 3 of those lots in consecutive years. And that approach is now in question, and the commission is considering an alternate, whether to confirm that approach or whether to consider alternate approaches. And we've budgeted funds for a more detailed and comprehensive market analysis to help make that decision. At the bottom of page 5, I mentioned the real estate strategy. This is really ties to a number of different aspects of the budget and the port operations. But again, there's that theme that if the toll revenue is not available to support other functions in say 2030 or 31, the real estate portfolio is one opportunity, one aspect of what we can do that can help make up that gap. However, we all have had some more challenges, I guess, have emerged with the COVID pandemic, and also the opportunities to develop real estate that can add to the revenue picture of the port. One of those that, at least at this point, does not appear feasible that we had been expecting to carry out was a commercial hangar up at the airport. The way that costs have gone up and the way the market demand has gone down, at least for commercial type operations at the airport, it does not appear feasible in the market at this time. And then also related to that, or related to the real estate strategy, is lot 900, which is also known as the Barman property at exit 63, just on the north side. Small lot, about 0.86 acres. But we've gone through a process of selecting or evaluating and then selecting a developer to work with who is proposing a small boutique hotel on that lot. That has negotiations to carry out, and we need to prove that up. But that's an effort, again, to not only develop a piece of property at a prime location, but also over time add to the revenues that come off of real estate. Lot 1 is very detailed. There's a lot of information here. The net takeaway there is that we have an opportunity, in part because of the significant grant funding that's been available, to at least install or construct some of the infrastructure that's required there. And there's 2 grants in hand that total $1 million, and there's about 3.9 million or so that's still outstanding in terms of grant applications. So that's an opportunity that we're trying to put together the financing package and move forward on that. At the bottom of page 6, or near the bottom, I point out that the assumption now is that this the bridge project will require all this land we're on now, the port office building, the port shop, the laydown yard, and that will require the port to find another location to carry out these functions that we have. And we anticipate that to be a lengthy effort because it will require a site selection evaluation process, and then the normal sequence of scoping and programming a new building and identifying the financing approach, financial plan, and then architectural plans and specifications and construction. So that's a lengthy process, significant potential impact on port operations. We have some locations on the waterfront where this office could be relocated, but there will be financial benefit from the cost, the amount we'll receive from the project for this work, but it will only be based on the value of this property. And it's assumed that the cost of that project will exceed what.
I have a question.
Yes,
question. When this is done, when all the setup and everything done, is this property now, is that all taken by the bridge, or will it go back in some kind of land we use?
Both. Some portion will be taken by the bridge.
Right.
On this side, we believe there will still be some land that would be developable on this side.
And the bridge would basically restore the land
To usable area.
Does anybody know how many on-site employees the bridge is in full construction? There might be.
No,
Guess.
The study indicated somewhere between 150 and 200 people. What's a big bridge?
Yeah. More space in this building now.
are you asking how many employees would
How
be?
many people will be on site working on that project?
during construction.
Yeah.
During construction, yeah.
And that kind of translated what portion of those would actually need office space or meeting space.
Well, often they use construction trailers too.
Yeah.
Yeah, my guess is that they'll bring in double wide trailers.
Do you think, with your background, you think that all this space in Marina Green will all get taken up?
I believe it is. Now, we got some challenges with that, but yeah. This is the logical space right out here for staging, around the corner for temporary construction offices. Maybe even this Marine One used for the RVMC.
Yeah.
It's kind of a logical area coming right through.
Is there space for staging material as well?
I think we need to take over this whole side of the port as a last staging area. There's other options. But feeding the bridge from this side, that's the logical place. Feeding it from the river, probably upriver a little bit over by the lumber yard. Take over some space there. But you'd have to barge in anything that you need.
Take out the boat launch as well.
Well, we're talking about that. We're gonna have to replace it, even if we use it for temporary, while we're in construction. And some of us think there's a method that we could put it on the other side and maybe put a boat ramp in there for 3 years, 4 years. But this makes the most sense, having this space right here. If we're looking to get the cheapest bridge.
Just curious questions, like, all right, sort of thinking ahead. Because you did have some money in here for improvements of the launch, some of the docks, and I thought, how long is that gonna last for? If the bridge construction gets underway, is that investment still a utility investment that you can move it over to the northwest corner? That's.
No, likely not, but the working assumption is the boat launch remains. It would be used both by the contractor to some extent, but also would be available. If there's some federal rules that are pretty archaic, but basically they apply to recreational property if it's taken out of the recreational use realm. So the hope is, the assumption is that that launch can still be used to some extent by recreational users.
Yeah.
And not, in other words, we wouldn't have to relocate it entirely, which you have to create an equivalent facility.
There's some real challenges with that. Safety issues. When you're having heavy construction equipment running right out here, you're trying to allow
Fast boats.
bass boats coming in between it. That's just a problem waiting to happen. But there's some challenges there that we got to work through.
You see barges inside the basin? Loading?
Not inside the basin. I don't think the basin's big enough for these barges. We're planning on a trestle, basically running right out into the river from the maintenance area, and they'll load them on that trestle. Is the thought.
I feel like I can't wait to be an old guy and sit out on the bench.
Hey,
You already have your
need
bench.
to help.
Get a pocket
We need to
brown bag and go sit there. Oh, geez, look at this, have a little bell that cheers them on or something.
You already have the bench, just bring it down. Yeah.
I'm getting close to being an old guy too.
Michael, so the feds and the state both have requirements, rules that govern in a lot of detail acquisition of property for projects that they're funding. That part of the same set of rules governs relocation as well. I'd like to see somebody dig into that as much as possible in the state federal rules to see whether the expensive work that the port's gonna have to do in identifying a relocation site, design work, and the actual process of moving and all that might be covered by the funding sources that will be overseeing all those activities. In other words, or they compensated for the physical real estate, but the actual cost of moving the operation to another location is often in federal projects compensated for it. as part of the project cost because it's part of the project. Normally, that would also be showing up in the EIS, final EIS, as one of the project impacts as well. So I'd just like to see some exploring to know whether or not there, for some reason, or as a public body would qualify for any kind of assistance, or whether or not we should actually be having a conversation early on.
So we're planning ahead, we're getting the most advantage we can from the federal funding source.
Right. The second thing, though, is it necessary to actually build a permanent new facility, or is there an opportunity with the land that's remaining afterward when the laydown space is needed and all the rest of that assembly and that is no longer required, that the port could in fact build back here, and then the interim simply rent space during the construction period and then move back into new facilities here after the.
You probably wouldn't be in this facility because it's probably
Oh, no, it's
gonna have to move, but a new facility, sure.
because the land will be there. Yeah, it's gonna be up for grabs.
Is it the most, I think what we're gonna have to do is evaluate what do we want to put back in here.
Yeah.
For the good of the community.
And there'll be a different port configuration in terms
Yeah.
of this needs.
But it's the intent that the bridge people will restore all of this out here. So if we want a parking lot paved, it'll be a parking lot paved, new paved, new stripes,
Sure.
you know, so.
But in terms of the port's actual costs incurred to make that space available, it may be captured by rules that would govern the.
In our estimate that we finished in November, we did include allowances for that. Is it sufficient? Don't know yet, but we thought through it. We've allowed for it.
Right, and often it's the case that you have to have a conversation in advance that beginning this date, we will be incurring costs of certain categories. And we're looking for compensation in some way under federal state rules, which hopefully we'll get some order about.
This new contract that we're about to award, this management contract. Part of the intent of that contract is to help us do just that. There are arms and legs to go figure all this out. We've got it written down. We got to start working through it.
Right, well, it seems like the port as the one impacted here as a public body and the owner of the real estate needs to be having conversations and understand that as well.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Because they're the ones that are bringing in the management team, the construction management outfit's not bringing in the money.
No, this is not construction management. This is the management team for figuring out how we're going to put a bridge in place.
Oh,
So
okay.
they'll be responsible for helping us support in the bi-state working group. But they will also be awarding and managing the engineering contract, the construction contract and so on. But so it's an umbrella management contract.
That's great. I'm just saying work program, being defined for contractors and the things that we're looking at. Let's not let a lot of costs and that kind of slip before we have some kind of agreement with the funding sources about what's the date for which you can record costs that might be reimbursed or will be reimbursed or not.
And there's some specialized expertise that's.
Yes,
needed
absolutely.
for that kind of.
Yeah, there is certainly.
Thank you. Well, we're on bridge. So bridge traffic, bridge equates to bridge tolls. I point out that the revenue is pretty much rebounded. We're still down a little bit, but we're trending back real close to where we were pre-COVID. Page 7 at the top, I just point out what is always a constant around here, which is that we have to constantly weigh the efforts on bridge replacement with our efforts on bridge repair and maintenance. We have to keep the current bridge safe and operational. That's our primary responsibility. And there are costs that we have to bear there. The big one that I point out is the new assumption that we have to replace the wire ropes. And our estimate is about 1.5, 1.6 million. We're budgeting 1.6, and that's to replace each of the wire ropes at the lift span. And that's based on our engineer's recommendation, and at this point would take place in the fall. The other big issue is that we're working on is to the extent the improvements that are necessary to get the weight limit back up either to 80,000 pounds or 64,000 pounds. And we're getting close to a specific game plan for that. It's hard to predict what the total cost would be, but at this point, our engineers are assuming it's somewhere in the order of magnitude of $300,000. And so that's what we're carrying in the budget. And there's a carryover. We have a project of the replacement of the approach ramps, the concrete approach ramps. At each end, we're assuming that'll get done in June of this year, but we're also including something in the budget in case part of that project carries over. On page 7 as well, a lot of description there about the grant funds that we've received. A really successful year with 15 million coming in, and the 5 million from 2017 is effectively gone. But just now we have accumulated 15 million that can allow the bridge replacement effort to go forward and to be more to accelerate the work on that. Now, I also point out here that the replacement reserve fund, again, we have a bridge repair and replacement fund that we've carried for many years now. Most of the funds from that have been needed for the current bridge. So the question for the commission that we discussed at spring planning and to the budget committee is, and it's in the proposed budget, is that we identify a new reserve fund just for replacement activities. And that fund will accumulate the grant funds that are coming in. But we also need to look ahead with the bi-state working group, and ultimately the bi-state bridge authority, who will own, operate, manage, finance the new bridge, is preparing them for their operation. Not said well, but we have to start accumulating funds that can act not only for their operating costs as they get stood up, but also to create a reserve fund for the bi-state bridge authority when it stood up, so that they can go to the capital markets and they can go to the federal grant funding agencies and demonstrate that they have capability and capacity to do their work.
I have a question.
Bring your bridge up.
But a couple of years ago, when we increased the price of the bridge,
Right.
we went to
2018, yeah.
right, okay, a couple of years ago. Time goes on. Anyway, some of that money was going to go into this fund to reserve for the bridge replacement. Is that what's being used for repair and, or is that
Yeah.
being, so are we talking about some of this going back into that same fund, or would be a new fund?
No,
Has
it'd
that fund been used?
be a new fund, and
New
that
fund.
the funds that have been accumulated and used out of the current bridge repair and replacement fund have primarily gone for bridge repair.
Okay,
And if you look at the big numbers, 1.6 million for wire ropes and
yeah.
300,000, et cetera, it's drawing down that reserve. It has been for several years.
So on the new one, how much of this would go when we do the increase? So much of that would go into this fund. Are we talking about increasing the tolls? Will
Right.
some of that go into this fund again?
All of the
all it
increase,
will?
yeah.
Okay.
If again, a toll increase has to, the fact that it's in a budget doesn't mean it's going to be carried out.
Right.
It has to be affirmed and approved. There needs to be public input and a lot of process.
Still better than swimming.
Yeah. But if it's done, Fred, help me out. It's on a full year basis. If it's a 13% or so increase, so the cash tolls would go from $2 to $2.25, and breeze by would go from $1 to $1.13 or so. Isn't that about 1.4 million on an annual?
Yeah,
basis?
so in the budget, our breeze by goes to $1.10 from the dollar
10.
for a class 1 vehicle. And then for a class 1 vehicle, cash toll goes down to $2 to $2.25. That effect, if you go ahead and put in, you start that increase of say January of 2023, the impact for half a year, January to the end of the fiscal year, which is June, gets you about $350,000. That's, and so so just to clarify on this, we took what was called the bridge repair and replacement fund, and we just basically broke it. the real name of the bridge repair and replacement fund. It's now the bridge repair fund.
Okay.
Because repairs, you're repairing something, you're repairing an existing asset. And then we created a new fund, bridge replacement fund, for something new. So those any increase would have to be identified as identified in the budget as an increase that goes over the bridge replacement fund. Likewise, all the grant monies for the replacement effort is going into that fund.
Second fund, Fred?
The bridge replacement fund. Yeah.
Thanks, Fred. Just a few other items in the Marina. President Short mentioned the floats, the parallel approach grounding floats at the launch ramp. That's in the budget. Fabrication is going to take a while, so this entire project is in the fiscal 23 budget. And I do point out that the commission did approve a 12% lease rate for marina tenants, and although it's not in the budget, the commission may well consider continuing to increase that at some level to make sure that the marina, the same thing goes to the airport, that the lease revenue is greater than expenditures to the extent we can start reserving some funds for capital projects. At the airport, North Ramp is done. I mentioned the commercial hangar does not look feasible at this time. We are looking at feasibility of T hangars or T hanger, box hanger combinations on the north side of the taxiway. And we've been working with the FAA on how to anticipate that. And for this budget year, what we're anticipating is just a really detailed feasibility study. So we understand clearly what are the requirements, how big, how wide, what sort of utility access, stormwater, vehicular access, and all sorts of things. So it's a pretty significant detailed feasibility study to prove up that concept. Let me just skip back to page 9, administration and management. We continue the policy of employees paying 10% for their medical premium. Staff salaries is a big one, and CPI is going up very quickly. So for purposes of this budget, we've included the full CPI based on the Western region of 6.2% for staff. I mentioned lobbying and advocacy because that comes out of that's in our general fund, and the total amount there is a little bit higher than the previous year, but $216,000. And most of that, I'd say 90% or so, is going for bridge replacement efforts. And then finally,
Can I provide a little input on that one piece?
But
Thought the numbers were good for state and federal lobbying efforts, but I've said this for a number of years. At this moment in time, we have a very senior congressional delegation back in Washington, D.C. And they're all getting close to my age or older, which means that they don't have that many more years back in Washington, D.C. before they run out of rubber. So I've always had my foot on the pedal of urgency to say, if we lose these people to retirement, we're losing Fazia, who currently chairs the Transportation Committee in the House, is an old friend of mine that was a lobbyist. He said, you don't ask for a barn fire the time you need a bonfire. You kindle it and you keep kindling it, killing, so that people know when you show up and you need a big fire, they're ready for you. And so what I'd like to suggest to the commission is that you look at multiple excursions back to Washington, D.C., representing your bi-state authorities, so that you have mayors of both sides or council members from both sides, so wherever your centers of influence are. It's nice to send your executives and your staff. Those are the hired guns. When you show up, you represent a vote. And that's really more important to them. And you'll see the value of the staff members showing up based on the number of elected officials that show up. And I will guarantee you, if the Washington, Oregon side put a small delegation together and they get organized with your lobbyists back in Washington, D.C., people will pay attention. And they'll give you more than what you get right now. And it's something that, because of the age of these senators in particular. Time is of the essence to me. It's just, I'm fond of the port, but that bridge is so critical to this region. It's like, if you just sort of wait for it to happen for legislation and say, okay, well, now we need 200 million or 300 million, you're gonna be in line with everybody else. But keeping that kindling going back there. So I'd like to see an addition to the budget that directly focuses on that bi-state group, and they go back as a recognized organization. What are you gonna become, an authority, or is that what's gonna be?
Bi-state Bridge Authority.
Okay, so it's a draft, and these people that are represented are sort of the trunk of the tree that's gonna emerge eventually, that goes back there, so.
And I think that's excellent input. I agree with you 100%.
Because they have, most of them have important committee positions right now, and you get that from seniority. And once they retire,
They can become lobbyists.
yeah, right. But they don't get a vote on the committee.
Expensive lobbyists. They do
Yeah.
really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I mean, the port, I mean, it's, when you look back at when this seat was, I actually take the different occasions where the replacement effort has been underway, but 2017 or thereabouts, 16, 17 was actually when did you guys do that policy I'm talking about, where it was, I just come on board and the commission was adopting a policy that was a good, better, best scenario for the bridge, and if it was only good, you're gonna spend this money. If it was better, it was like, okay, less money, it was best. Well, we're below all those now, and you start seeing load restrictions showing up, and see falls on your bridge. But that policy really drove, here's a condition of your bridge, it isn't gonna last that much longer, and it's done a wonderful job for Hood River in terms of investments and assets and such. But it's time to give the old girl a break, and I'd say put her down. And so those seats were planned a long time ago, and I'm really proud of you guys. When I saw that 75 million pop up, it's like, okay, now I'm feeling pretty good about this. 10 or 15 million from the 15, so $90 million. That's, and the nice thing about it, from my background, you got your local, state, federal, all vested into this thing now, and that is a really unique scenario. And so your success rate to me is even better.
Another step beyond that, Senator King has talked to us through the bi-state working group. And he was instrumental in giving the 75 million. And he asked about the schedule, and we told him, and he said, wow, that's way too late. How can you accelerate it? And we said, it's easy. Give me the money up front, and we'll do a design build, and we're on our way. And he is up for the challenge. So the bi-state wants to pounce on that.
Yeah.
Get him, get Oregon, get the feds together and see if we can't accelerate this thing. Our internal plan is to way beat I-5 into the water and open for service. And I-5 will still be in design by the time we're done.
Was what kicked us into gear when the public crossings collapsed. I mean, all the politics were available at that time, and we are not a big population center here, not a lot of those. We're kind of scrappy, and we're inside a scenic area, and Michael and Hal Hamstra crafted up some language and stuck it in a water resources bill that said if you're inside one of the 12 national scenic areas in the country and happen to have a bridge, you get to check this box.
That was a fast.
That was a fast act.
But was it? Okay. So that, and I love telling friends, oh yeah, so we got this Republican senator from Washington State, an all Democratic House and Senate, that managed to pull out 75 million out of it. I said, that guy is Merlin.
Yeah.
And get as close to that set of hips as you could possibly get.
Well, I think the bi-state working group especially with Jacob Anderson, who is the commissioner from Klickitat County. He and Senator King made it happen.
So that has been played out a few times in the gorge where Washington put something together and it made Oregon move.
Yeah.
And it was just a pancake job. You get a little local money, you get a little more from Washington, and Oregon kicks up, and then pretty soon you work your way to the top. I don't mean to drag this out. My point was to put something in this budget that takes a group of people back to Washington DC. My instincts tell me at least twice a year. I mean, you can use the Pacific Northwest Waterways Association as one of the reasons for going back. But the second time, based on maybe Hal Hemstra's, well, here's the best time for you to come back, and I'll help schedule up all these people to go. And it is Commissioner Shepherd, it is an experience of a lifetime to go. I mean,
I think it's a great idea.
it's worth going back there.
I might suggest that we let Michael finish up here. I want to make sure you guys have time to dive into the actual numbers after Fred makes his presentation. We're already kind of running a half an hour over.
All right, last thing, just.
That's
pointing-
because you elected a president.
It's
It's chatty,
I just want to make sure you have time.
I want to know what's going on.
The last item is just a $65,000 budget item for continued development of the fiscal sustainability strategy, which is the way in which the commission looks ahead to how the commission functions, what its scope is, what its financing basis is in the years ahead. So we have time, but there's a point at which we assume that the bridge goes away and we need to continue to work to be prepared for that. So that's my budget officer message.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 4, the budget review. Our retired CFO. Just say it.
This one here.
Oh, well, good afternoon, guys. This will be my last budget. For the 4th of February. So, but I do want to, I really do want to thank the entire budget committee. You guys have, it's been an honor working with you guys 2 years. John, Judy, Larry. And thank you, Brian, for stepping up. Becca, somewhere around there. Thank you so much. So, without any further ado, let's get started. If-
That page.
Yep, I will get to it. So let's turn. Budget law is about expenditures. It is not about revenue. So, but the first thing I'm going to do is if you go to page 11, I got 2 graphs. One graph is about your resources, which is revenues plus your beginning fund balance. And then the second page, page 12, is about expenditures. So it shows you what you spent on, or what you've been spending. So if we just look at the revenue, page 11, you can see that we start out with a large beginning fund balance. We're almost at 20 million, we got 19.8 million. But it's no secret, our totals come in about 6.6, and that's with that is with a total increase happening around January of 2023. That's not to say it will happen. That's just what the budget reflects. Leases, it shows you we got 6.6 of total. We got about 2.5 of leases. So leases do make up a large piece, and then it starts to drop off. Recreation fees, Marina, airport. You can see the numbers. But one piece I do want to say, we have about $6.2 million in grants, and those are most of that is capital grants. Michael alluded to the fact that we have about $15 million worth of grants, but we're not going to burn that $15 million in 1 year. So that's why we're going to burn about $6.6 million of grant money in this next year. So that's why that's the difference. And the numbers that we talked about.
Can I ask a question? Is that for those grants firm? You have those grants?
No, No. We do have some of the grants. So the one piece we are getting from Oregon, which is the ARPA grant, the $5 million, we'll actually get that. Unlike most grants are reimbursable, I spend it, I put in a request, you give me the reimbursement back, or you give my funding back. This, the ARPA is a $5 million, here you go, here's $5 million. What we do have also is we have a Washington grant, another $5 million. That is pretty hard, but the agreement has to be written and signed. So that is still outstanding, but the grant shows that because the probability is very high. So, and then the third grant is a build grant, which we do have. We just need to get through the agreement process of the contract process. And that will occur in the next year as well. Good question. So with regard to the expenditure side of the equation, as you can see, our ending fund balances will go down, and that's mainly because of what's shaded in green. And that's capital. We are going to use a lot of capital. At least we are budgeting for the use of a lot of capital, 10.3 million. It's historically been this way. Personal services, if you always add up personal services throughout the year, add up material services, they never equal what we spend in capital. This is one of the few local governments that capital, as a percentage of its overall budget, is the highest category. And it's been that way year in, year out. We just have a lot of the bridge and other assets that we continue to use capital dollars for. So that's the overall look at it. I'm going to dive now into the expenditure. So in governmental budgeting, they break spending down into personal services, materials and services, and capital and debt. Since we don't show any debt this year, I'm going to first go to personal services. And in this budget, I'm going to streamline it, believe it or not, I will. And I'll just talk about just the highlights. What's really different in this budget compared to other budgets? Whether it's going up significantly or down significantly. The rest of it is basically, you know, sort of what I call a baseline budget where we carry the same sort of costs moving forward. So let's turn to, yeah, okay. So we are going to turn to page 29. So we'll hit the first category of cost, which is personal services. So what you have here in this page is budget law basically says you have to show 2 years of actuals, prior year actuals. You need to show the current year budget, and then you need to show what you propose in the next year budget. And so that's what I have. Wages, as you can see, is going up quite a bit. But the biggest component, there's 2 big components. One is we do have a cost of living, and Michael talked about that. This cost of living, the impact to the budget as compared to this current year budget is about $110,000. The other components that's making this budget increase is step increases. So another piece, the third piece is contingency. We are putting in this budget a large contingency for something that, you know, for the unknown that's going to play out, that could play out next year. So we have a larger contingency. Other years we don't put as much. This year we have. And then we are looking at reclassing some staff positions. So collectively, yeah, we have about a 4.5% increase in wages. But if you take out the contingency, because that's the one piece that's abnormal from other years, our wages are going up 7.1%. The majority of that is cost of living. If you look at our benefits, usually in the past, our benefits has been the largest piece of the increase. And this year, not so much. Healthcare is almost flat. PERS, likewise, not much going on with PERS. The taxes and unemployment, that's marginal, but contingency, the taxes and benefits, that's related to the contingency is the largest piece to taxes and benefits. So that is increasing here as well. So with that, if you look at personnel between this current year and this next year, we are moving up by about 1 FTE. So that's the only difference. Overall, if you put in your wages and taxes and benefits, our increase comes to about 11.8%. Oh, it's dropped down. Yeah, because taxes and benefits wasn't as big an increase. And then if you take out contingency, our overall personnel costs increase about 5.4%. So that's the one piece that I want to talk about. And then I just basically give a pictorial of what's the impact to the general fund from current year to next year, what's the impact to the revenue fund, what's the impact to the bridge repair fund, which used to be the bridge repair and replacement fund, but now it's just a repair fund. And then what's the impact to the new bridge replacement fund, since it's sort of new. So there I just sort of restated what it would have been and it's currently. So that's the one piece with regard to personnel services. The takeaway is what's driving costs? Well, inflation for one, the COLA, and a large contingency for some costs that could occur in the next year. So what happens, let's see. If you go, that's page 29 and page 30. If you go to page 31, I don't have it on the screen, but if you go to page 31, what I do is I go through staffing and we talk about this twice.
We don't have a page.
I think it's
31.
different in our pocket.
What's the title of it?
Personnel
Personnel
allocation
allocations.
to asset centers and funds.
I got one.
I have one.
Yeah,
31. Oops.
Oh, you're in it. Okay.
It's in a different section.
Okay.
Michael, we got it.
We got it.
It's page 31. It's just not in that same section.
okay.
It's fine.
So what happens is all the staffing, we distribute everyone's costs, what's your makeup? Someone that's in customer service that deals with the bridge would have a high percentage of their time allocated to the bridge. If someone's like at the waterfront, like a seasonal worker at the event site, a lot of their time would be at the event site. And so this page basically allocates everyone's time out. And what happens is we take these dollars that you see in the budget document, and then we distribute that through the typical asset centers.
Is there a logic behind how you allocated these? Is it based on approximate amount of time that is spent in the area?
Correct. And then we take each, like the maintenance as an aggregate, but we take each person individually and then they aggregate them. And then we allocate them based on that aggregate. Whether it's the CFO's time or accounts, we do a sort of a best guess. We do about twice a year just to see, it's about, it is a best guess, but it's probably closer to fine because, if people know where they're spending most of their time. So
I found this sheet very interesting. I did go through it. I did a little calculation that says for each of these positions, how much of their time do you have here dedicated to the old bridge? Not the new one, but the old one. And it was interesting, if you just read through the numbers, executive director starting at the left, moving to the right, 35%, 33%, 4%, 80%, 53, 50, 67, 0, 49%. The key thing there is as the bridge goes away, we got a problem with staffing. If this is really right.
well, to some extent, correct. I mean, some of the staff, the large piece of their time is on the bridge. The likelihood is they would be still working on the bridge, and you would have a position working on the bridge like in the case of customer service,
Which bridge are you talking about now?
a replacement bridge. You know,
Not
you would have-
necessarily.
You know,
I-
you
I-
would,
we can't
honestly,
count
you're
on it.
going to have a resource, an expenditure, whether you contract it out or whether it's in-house, you'll have an expenditure for customer service. Or the bi-state working group would have an expenditure for customer service. That doesn't go away. That doesn't go away. So as far as, this is how then we distribute those costs, and you'll see that in the proposed budget under personal services for each asset center. So I'm going to drop over to the next category of cost with regard to materials and services. And that will be 32 through 34, right? Yeah, 32 through 34. And so what you have here is the category of cost. In this case, it's going to be utilities, it's going to be maintenance, insurance, miscellaneous. Miscellaneous includes janitorial services and miscellaneous items. Property taxes, and professional services. And we break out professional services into legal and other non-legal professional services. And so what has happened, you'll see 4 columns. The 2 columns to the left is for the years ended in 2020 and 2021. Our current year budget for 2022 and 2023 is this next year budget. As you can see, what we're looking at, I'll go over the big increases, like for each category of costs. And the utilities, the biggest increase, most of this is baseline for each of the asset centers, but the biggest increase will be the Halyard building. And that's due to the production increases that we've had at the Halyard building and that they put in place. So they're just burning a lot more utility. And so that is budgeted. However, there should be a side note here, because under the Halyard building and under contract with Green, that cost is reimbursable to the port. So no matter how high those utility costs go, the port is reimbursed for those utility costs. So,
Can I ask a question from an
Yeah.
administrative standpoint? Do we does the port want to be that way? Do they, instead of a triple net, we're underwriting, we're basically banking their utilities for them. As long as they're a strong operating enterprise, you don't have any concerns, but if you don't have any indicators, you might get stuck with, I don't know what the bill looks like on an annual basis.
yeah, so what happened a few years back, I want to say it was 3 years back, where we started to migrate to a new lease framework. And then that new lease framework, instead of doing here's your base and here's your utility bill and here's your property tax bill, we incorporated a additional rent. So here's your base rent. And then what happens at the end of each year is we look at all the utility costs, we look at your miscellaneous and maintenance costs, and we say, okay, this is what it was. And so this is what you will pay going forward. And that's additional rent that under that new framework basically occurs. Instead of getting double bills, now you only get a base lease bill and you get additional rent bill. But what's a little different under that additional rent bill is that you do include maintenance and you do include some miscellaneous costs as well. And previously it was only utilities and property tax.
So then we true it up at the end of the year
Yeah.
to make
True
sure.
it up.
So
So
is it a big number? Is it a big number, like with freight?
it would, yes, for premium, it's a big number. Everyone else is not.
You're talking about $50,000-$60,000?
More like 40. Yeah. So, because if you're an industry that's burning through a lot of utilities, really, or maintenance, then you're going to have a big bill. If you're not, then you won't have a very big bill. Your lease won't get adjusted that much.
It's always been my concern that public agency or the port doesn't become someone's bank. And that, so, 40,000, it's a lot of money. I guess my note of concern is, when you're doing your lease updates, that might be more than you want to be part of. It's a startup company, okay, I get it, that's helping to reduce that front-end loading, but this is an established company. Maybe they need a more mature lease in the next round.
Yeah.
It takes that, at least takes the utility obligation out of the port and maybe ends up with, here's the maintenance side of this thing.
Yeah, I hear you. I just,
You can argue back, that's not.
no, it just seems a little oddball, right? Because it's the only one out of the whole set of tenants we have that has a large bill. It's the only one. The rest of them are pretty flat. And some of them actually we owe a refund because their maintenance costs and utility costs like that. So, and it's not, we're talking small, like $1,000, $2,000. So Stream is the oddball out. So if you stick to that frame, then I'm like, the rest of them are pretty small.
But in the future, we're going to be a lot more sensitive to a hiccup in their payment if they get in trouble or whatever happens, because we just aren't going to have the financial depth to absorb things like that.
Right. Right. So you can
Maybe
do it in several ways. You can
quarterly
change
quarterly
restructure.
payments.
Are you registering the same concern as I have?
Yeah, I'm pointing that that's true, especially in the future, I think.
Yeah.
But maybe there's an in-between, the transition, you can do quarterly instead of, at the end of the year.
Well, that additional grant, what you can do is just pump it up and you do the reverse. You put the burden on the tenant and then the tenant gets a refund.
Right.
You can go either way with it. But we try to do our best to, analyze what that cost would be. As you walk down to the other category of maintenance is not moving very much, it's slightly about 2.1%. So nothing's going on there really. With regard to insurance, the one piece that is increasing slightly is with regard to the bridge. So there's that's where the majority of the cost of the related to insurance is.
Hey, Fred, sorry, can you remind me, when is, we had a two-year term, 3-year, that's right. And is that up in 23 or?
Correct.
24? So we're going to have to renegotiate a new.
We'll have to renegotiate for the calendar, remember it's a calendar year, 2023. So we have a little bit.
I'm sure that's going to pop up.
Possibly, we shall see. With regard to property taxes, I was told by Brian Deaton over at the county, he said you should budget for at least 3%. So showing about 3% increases in property. The rest of it, the slight reduction with regard to miscellaneous, most of it's related to the bridge. We had a miscellaneous cost of a lot of when we were operating, when we didn't have a toll collector, we're burning through a lot of postage, a lot of paper, so we're burning through a lot of miscellaneous costs. And so with the toll collectors back, I'm reducing a lot of that miscellaneous budget for the bridge. So that's where that decrease is occurring. Legal. So one piece is lot 1. There is an increase for, well, it's keeping the same legal cost for the waterfront. Since the waterfront is going to be a point of discussion for this next year. So keeping legal costs at least at the level of this year's budget is prudent. With regard to other professional costs, so you see reduction in the bridge, and that has to do more with our license plate recognition system. So what we do with the license plate recognition system is during the pandemic, we basically had to look at license plates and then validate those license plates against a state DMV. And so in some cases, there is a fee. In this case, it was outside the state of Oregon. We had to use our third party, Duncan Solutions, to provide that. And there is a fee with that. And there's a cost with that. But what we did with the programming is if you're, let's say, Washington, and you're, license plate 123, and I had to go look you up. Well, now I stored that data. So the next time you go through, I don't have to go to the DMV. I basically have, you're John Doe, this is where you live, and I can use that data. So that is why a lot of those costs aren't repetitive. I'm able to use the system now to basically benefit our budget, basically. Panel, there is a $50,000 market study for Hanel. Michael talked about it in his budget message. That is to look at the overall project cost. Also, if you look at the airport, keep dropping down to the airport, there's about a 50,000 feasibility study with regard to the hangar or commercial hangar there at the airport. So that is why that number is high. And then also for administration, we have about a $15,000 building analysis. And that's to look at the whole spectrum of our industrial and commercial properties. Take a look at that. And so that is in other professional services for the administration part.
Does budget committee understand what we're trying to do on those line items? Airport panel, we want to know what can we do ourselves, what do we want to work with some private money on, what were the options and where. That has to do with T hangars, that has to do with building or leasing or selling land at lower handles. So in those two places, we've directed staff to get us those answers because we're wanting to move forward, but we want to know the best way. So that's what those are going to be.
Best investment.
Yeah.
Which is what you need to do. I mean, 5 to 7 years, you're going to be running a pretty stark operation, so you don't have another dollar you spent today.
And our direction was we want to do this quickly. What do we need to start getting our questions answered? That was it.
So what you see here, all these categories of costs by asset center, these numbers get thrown over into with the budget document, and you will see all these costs under materials and services. So so that's why I want to dive into the actual costs. The next category of costs is capital, so it's the largest component. And that will be 35 and 36. So I'm gonna go pretty quickly through here, because some of it was brought up, I think it's pretty plain as well. There's a lot of placeholders, so I'm not going to really talk about the placeholders. So they're 10,000, 15,000, or 20,000. There are tenant improvement placeholders, just in case something is happening. We have a budget authority to move forward. So big seven, there's a placeholder, and there's the fire alarm system upgrade of 12,000. The big piece here is over in the Maritime building, $300,000. So that's that storm line replacement. That's sort of an iffy. That's if the city moves forward and they move forward at a certain time period, this fiscal year, this coming fiscal year. And we would need to, they direct us that we need to restore that storm line. So that's in there as a placeholder.
So Fred, I thought urban renewal funds were being used for that.
They are.
They are for the main line. This is the last leg, phase 4, that's the outfall of the river. And basically we have to, it's on us to put the storm line in that captures the catch basins in Portway.
Right. Okay.
So the timing of all that is sort of, it's been unknown, but it's better to have something than not. Here is where Michael was talking about the Anchor Way permitting and infrastructure for Anchor Way on lot 1. We have about 1.2 million. That if that comes to fruition, then yeah, we would probably burn that much. But we have right now about $1 million in grant money. Yeah, so we have about 500,000 the iOS grant. That's not yet signed, is it?
No, it's done.
It's done, okay. And the ARPA is done as well, right?
Yeah, that was a legislative appropriation.
Okay, so we do have $1 million solid for lot 1.
Okay.
We have First Street paving. If, let's say nothing occurs, we could do First Street paving. I put it in as a contingency just in case. But we do have to do some parking kiosk upgrade. And I put a placeholder of about 30,000. Moving down, Halyard Building, we have a placeholder, there's about $20,000 worth of roof work that we're looking at. There's a Jensen Building, there's a placeholder. Well, there's some actual roofing and HVAC work that could occur, but what is in the budget that looks like it can move forward is the north side window replacement of 100,000. We do need some to do some work at the state or the DMV building, some roof work and some exterior repair. That's 75,000. We have a placeholder for the Marina office. Building upgrades. We have a sort of a placeholder for the fourth building, but this one for the charging station, we had it in this year's budget, and we're moving it over into next year's budget as well.
All three commissioners just pointed to that, and had the exact same thing marked. Does the budget committee think it's a good use of funds to put in a $50,000 charging station here? Number one, we don't own any electric vehicles, but put it in here when it's just gonna have to get ripped out in 5 years, 7 years.
I think if you get enough critical mass electric cars, you get some federal dollars coming out to help implement the connectivity of the highway system.
Now, I isolated it here to the port office. Doesn't mean you can't put a charging, you can put a charging station anywhere. But you have to,
Yeah, but who's gonna use it?
you know, that's for the community, yeah.
But communities
Yeah.
more up there and up the valley than.
No one's gonna come down here and park a car and charge.
What are you charging?
Electric cars.
Yeah, 52% of the electric cars are Teslas, the other 48 aren't. So what you got is half a charging station.
So I'm hearing you
And
say.
you got a bunch of them up at
Safeway.
Safeway
nobody's there.
that nobody ever sits at, so I
See
don't
one car
understand.
there.
All right,
Walmart has them too. No one ever goes there.
I'm hearing something.
Yeah.
So it's your budget here. It's your
All
budget.
right, I'm hearing something. Okay, so we'll take that out. Timber
Hold on a
incubation.
second, who put the one over by the gas station?
That's the.
Don't get us started.
Oh, that's that was a grant program by a company called Fourth.
Ability.
They put that,
Mm-hmm.
It's a car share.
is it a franchise type thing?
They put it in with the EPA grant. It's a pilot project for the EPA.
Yeah, you're eligible for those too.
We gave up 2 parking spaces for them, so there's an offset of potential lost revenue for the park.
I don't think we're there for the port property yet.
All right. We'll keep moving here. Timber incubator, got a placeholder for 10,000. Wasco, 15,000, but we do have some electrical work. So we're thinking we still might be able to get this done this year, but I wanted to put it in next year's budget in case it slides into next year. Panel mill, we got for permitting, we got about 25,000 at Woodville. Well, then Woodville, $250,000. And Michael talked a little bit. Now we're coming into the bigger pieces of our budget for capital. The airport, we do have some hangar lights and some runway lights. The combination of both of them is about $55,000. There is a need at the airport to relocate the AWOS. So that's about $30,000. There's some wetland mitigation that we have to do there, about 30,000. Repainting the FBO, about 20,000. And then I have here, that's in this year's budget, but it probably will get moved over into next year because it's just, we have the avgas tank installation and they've just, like everyone else, they have a supply chain issue and they just haven't got the materials and the electronics to finish our tank. So when that occurs, then we will be able to move forward. And that has a grant that's related to a reimbursable grant. And then
On that particular one, since you're indicating it'll probably go to next year, does that have an increase clause in the contract, inflation or anything? Or are
no,
they
the fixed amount. Yeah. So, and then we have some grant money from the North Apron that's still outstanding. It probably won't, it takes forever to go through the FAA to finally close your grant out that you get reimbursed for the 10%. And so that's what this is.
How much is left over from that grant?
About 255,000.
We can't come up with some way of spending that?
No, we've already spent it. This is the reimbursement.
You gotta spend it, then you can pay for it.
While we're on miscellaneous piece, I had these little notes, I was, it's like little things about it. And Ben, you can probably respond to this just as well as I can. But in the last 3 years, we've seen more and more theft going on in Hood River, our underbelly, which was always, we live here, our doors are unlocked, and this is how that's changing. We're seeing a lot more graffiti, a lot more foul affairs. We've had a couple of shootings. We have more theft. There's more homeless. There's more mentally disabled people that we see. Camps are growing. We have a lot of people with a lot of big investments in their equipment. I know there's not a line item, but I think it's a worthy discussion for the board. Think about the possibility of saying, okay, what should we be doing from a security camera standpoint? Here, at the airport, out on our properties, at least to have the ability to pick up somebody that was coming and going and maybe get a car. Just,
It's already being addressed.
Yeah.
You're right. Yep. Already had the commission's.
I didn't see it in here. Oh.
The commission already,
Because we
approved
did
it. It's already in
It's
the
already
works
done.
now.
Well, you could have shut me off 3 minutes ago.
No, you're exactly right. We agree with you.
Well, good for you. 'cause
You
that's-
validated the
It's
work.
it's an unfortunate thing that we gotta do. It's just- But it's got some headwind now.
So the rest of the airport, we got some SDS hangar repairs budgeted for next year, and also some hangar changes. So that's the airport. About 440,000, but about 285,000 of it's grant. Let's go into the bridge. And this is where the needle is moved. We have about $190,000 worth of tolling that's possible. We have a Twilio integration, what that is, a phone system integration that ties into the customer service system. We held off because there was going to be an upgrade to the Twilio system that was much more robust, so we've been waiting on that. If we want to go to all electronic tolling, one of the things we found during the time that we went and did it during the pandemic was we need electronic signage out there. I mean, you need overhead, you need to tell your customers, this is what is happening. And to do that, you need to put that signage out there. So we budgeted this year, I re-budgeted for next year, whether we spend it, but if we're gonna go down that route, if we are, then you really do need to communicate to your customers what, that where they need to pay and so forth, and that electronic signage really does help.
What would be on the sign? Give me an example.
It's a rotating, it's a great example is that you've gone through the airport at PDX with parking.
Yeah.
It's not much like that.
So
On the
it
game.
basically says you're getting hit with $1.50 or.
And this is how you pay
70.
your bill and so forth like that.
Is that a sign that would be potentially able to be transferred to a different bridge in the future? Or does it have that kind of longevity?
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of money for a
It's just a
gangway.
gangway. It just sits on your gangway. So yeah, you would just take it off, put on a new gangway and you're up and running. So the hardware is very transferable.
Architects don't like to reuse equipment
Oh,
from
I know.
somebody else's
Just
project.
a lot of money for a short period of
I
time.
know.
Is why I don't-
That's why I said, it's one of those, we always try to balance how much you spend on the existing grid versus.
Have we heard any complaints thus far that people don't know what their credit cards getting charged?
No, that's not the case. The issue is when you pull the toll collectors out and there's nobody up there telling a customer what to do, you need to communicate to your customer. And if you're gonna do that, then that is where you need to have electronic signage telling your customer from either side coming that they see it in advance and they can read it from far away. That, okay, this is what I need to do. And so it would mirror what, the Golden Gate does. It mirrors what, a lot of LA signage is doing on the toll roads and so forth. So you need to do that, or otherwise you just get just bombarded with phone calls I
Have we
didn't see
been,
anything.
have we been bombarded with phone calls?
Not like that because we haven't gone, we only did that for about a month and a half.
And we were bombarded.
And we were
It
bombarded.
was, nobody was
It
happy.
was not fun. It was not fun. We were sitting here at 9 o'clock at night, just answering phone calls, just phone calls. So, but yeah, if you have toll collectors up there, you don't need this. You don't. So,
85,000 is a lot of money. And I'm questioning whether it'll really get transferred to the new bridge.
oh yeah, it's just a module that you put up there. You can take any hardware and
What happens if we don't even have toll collectors on the new bridge?
well, you better be communicating to your customer ahead of time of when they're crossing, how much it's costing them. So you're going to need some sort of electronic communication device.
That I don't disagree with. I'm just wondering if this one truly will be able to fit into the architecture.
Yeah. This one, I leave it in the budget. And you have to make a decision. You don't put this, you don't change your electronic signage until you're ready to pull the toll. You don't do this until you're ready to do it.
Can I just throw one thought out? I don't have a conclusion one way or the other, but as we get closer to construction, signage like this would really help with any traffic flow changes that we might have or extended closures. We have potentially a 5 to 7 day closure plan this year that's going to really take some really extensive signing. So it's just something to kind of think about whether or not it would be useful, and the cost benefit analysis would be good for those in between this bridge and the next bridge for messaging for changing conditions and traffic flow or something.
So the other items we have for the tolling is multiple addresses for correct access with the DMV. This has more to do with Oregon DMV. So that's about 13,000. That's not very much. And then I put it in the budget. It's a tweener. I put it in the budget anyway. We don't have to do it this year, but at some point, whether it's later this year, this next year, 2023, which would be late 2023, or early 2023-24 budget, we need to start looking at replacing our link controllers. And that's a piece of hardware. So
What is that?
that's the link controller controls all your data that comes across that bridge. So the number of axles, the speed of the vehicle, the type of vehicle, so forth.
The existing one is getting old
We
or?
put them in
outdated?
late 2016, 17 time period.
Okay.
So, it's like it's like a PC. So at some point you do need to replace them. And then we also have a speed indicator signage, $40,000. I don't know. Someone said to put that in there. I did, but I know what a speed indicator signage is. We may or may not be able to.
I'm amazed. I go across that bridge a couple times a week and I'm amazed at how fast people, they don't heed the 25.
Yeah.
It almost ought to say 15 because maybe then they do 20 or 25. I mean, right now it's, some of them really get trucked, but I'm amazed at how pushy everybody is. They don't want to do 25. So when you do 25, you're holding up the whole line.
We just authorized 15.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, but it doesn't say 15.
Not yet.
It's
No,
going
we're-
to, I think that would be great. I mean, other bridges do, and it slows everybody down, because somebody was saying that one of the biggest damages to the bridge is speed. If that's the case, then maybe it's gotta be 10 or 15 or whatever it is.
Yeah, during the summertime, it drops down only because we get so much traffic out there. You can't go that fast.
Yeah,
But you're right. And the
They're
shoulder
fast.
seasons in the wintertime, those guys get going. Yeah, you're right. The, one of the things here on the, with regard to the bridge CIP is we have about $3 million, and this is under the build grant that we will then basically need to sign off on. But with it, it's just a straight $3 million of engineering, $3 million reimbursement under the build grant. And then the Washington grant, same way. There we can use it also for engineering, and it's just a one-to-one relationship. The difference with the Washington grant that was that I want to make is
So
the
what is,
Washington grant, you can use it towards the match on the bill. So under the federal grant, there's a match component of it, 25%, but you can use the Washington grant for that match.
so what we're talking about here in these two items, it's for the replacement bridge.
Mhm.
And on the second page, the $1,000,001, funded from the Washington grant will pay for the replacement bridge management contract for this period. $3 million on the other side will pay for the get-go on the architect engineering contract that we want to award by the end of this year. So it'll be about 6 months of this particular period that this 3 million will fund. And it's in the ballpark. We haven't awarded the contract. We don't know what it's really going to cost yet. But it should be in that ballpark.
Hey, Fred, before you go on, do you want to talk about the location of the Oregon ARPA funds?
So I will get to that when we get to the bridge replacement fund. I'm just going through the CIP. So we'll do that when we get to the actual fund document. How's that? Okay, so with regard to the bridge repair fund, so we have, Michael talked about where we're going out for the bridge approach ramp overlays right now. I put about $200,000 just in case we don't get it done. So this one, if we get it done, great. We have it in this year's budget. But if we, for whatever reason, it scoots into the next year, we have some authority or appropriation, I could say, in next year's budget. And then the other items, underwater scour evaluation, 40, earth scanning of 15, pier cap repairs of 60,000, miscellaneous steel repairs of 30. Michael talked about the weight rating analysis, $350,000. We have our year-to-year deck welding of 60, and year-to-year of guardrail segments 60. But this is the one piece he did talk about, and this moves our budget quite a bit. And this moves our ending fund balance. The $1.6 million is the counterweight. So that is coming out of our reserve. And then we have this in our budget. This right here is you walk around the trail underneath the bridge to shore up that south abutment. And then we have a $20,000. So yeah, $6.7 million of capital, both whether it's the bridge repair or the bridge replacement fund, but we have about 4.1 million. With regard to the marina, we have 3 items. We have paving the parking lot for 15. And the prior year budget, we have the ramp dock repairs. So that's probably going to slide into this next year of about 283,000, but we have a grant of 132.3. So that will slide over into this next year. We also have for the Southbound repairs, about 35,000. Marina Park, lighting and replacement of the boards there on the footbridge, about 75, probably be less than that, but I have that based on prior year budget. And then the Marina Beach overlook signage is about 53,000. Event site, landscaping about 30,000. And then we also have this event site dock repairs of 45,000. That's out there, that's outstanding. I put it in there. We might get to it at the end of this year and we might not. So I put it in there for 2023 in case we can't get to it by the end of June.
Well, for a second, is that where the restaurant is, or is that where the kayak operating?
No, that's over there where Sandbar Cafe.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then tree replacement for the Hookstead Nichols area, and then grading for that area, 15. Administration, we have a copier, and we run 2 copiers. We had one last year. We're replacing the older of the 2 now this next year. And then PC software, 15,000. That's sort of ongoing. Maintenance, they have a mower, tractor, no, trailer for the mower of about 20,000, and then 2 pickup trucks that replace the old And that's what we have in the budget. And then all these costs, the asset center flows into those capital outlay categories in the budget. This is what I mean.
Can I ask a question on your equipment? Are we on a replacement program, and how are we doing against that? Are we keeping up with it, or are we falling behind?
I think we're right on target, actually.
John, do you agree? John Mann?
Sorry, everyone, trying to get my mute off. Yes, I do.
Okay.
So going into the expenditures budget, if you go back to page
Before you go there, can I ask just a couple questions? I have just a couple things. So on the port office building, there's 50,000 for the building upgrades. Since we know we're losing the port offices, is that something that we can reevaluate to see if how much of that we really need to spend? Since
Yeah, help me out here, Fred. It was a higher amount. We're carrying it. We finished the plans and specs. We had a permit. This is a reduced amount, but there's some security related matters that could benefit from some reconfiguration.
okay,
So it's a
some of it
placeholder.
would be camera technology.
okay,
And the-
But yeah, if your point is it 50,000? I'm like, yeah, probably be less.
okay. Okay, and then the other one that I had was, again, like the marina for paving and whatnot. Is that a crucial thing for this year if we're not sure what's gonna happen with the marina and the bridge? Is it?
You're talking about Marina paving.
Yeah.
That's a placeholder for more for patching. I think it was only
For patching,
$15,000.
Yeah.
Wasn't a repaving project.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
So if you go to page 18, basically from 18 through 30. Everything that you saw in personal services that we talked about, rural services that we talked about, capital outlay comes flowing back into these cells. So like you saw the bridge, X amount, the personal services, wages, salaries, benefits, all the material services and all the capital outlay flows into these cells from those prior worksheets. So there's, that's the one area that, that's why I touch base on those specific categories. I want to talk about the revenue fund resource first. And that is in page 13 through 17. And this is the resource side. So this is can be a little bit more mushy.
Fred,
But-
13 is the general fund.
Did I say, okay,
15,
you're right. 15. Thank you. 15 to 17. So what we do when we go and budget, this is the revenue fund. We estimate what the starting cash balance is. Estimate around 11.5. As we get closer to the end of the year, we can screw that up possibly. But this is the one piece I want to talk about. It's the bridge. This is where we get about $6.7 million. And about 350,000 of that 6.7 is really related to a tolling fees that would occur in January of 2023. And it's 10 cents for resupply, and then a quarter for the cash testing. Go ahead.
Fred, do you have any idea what the toll's gonna be on the new bridge? I mean, if we're getting our toll put up to $1.50 by 2 years before that, then
If we listen
Oh,
to
no.
Senator King, he would like to have none. And I said, we're okay with that.
yeah, okay, I'm just saying, if we're so far apart and make this giant leap to the new
Yeah.
bridge,
There's in the first year work plan for this new contract, there's a tolling study in there. And that'll be the first indicator of what it could be. And there's going to be a range of it depending on how much funds we can attract from the feds and the states, of course. And then eventually what the bridge is going to cost. We've got an estimate on that. But we start with nothing. If we can get the feds and everybody to pony up what King would like to do to something else.
Okay, so we'll do the poor OS deal for a while. It's fine.
We're a little ways away from figuring that out yet.
Has he given you some idea what he thinks the contributions could be?
How you
When
get
we
there?
told him the total cost of the bridge, Brian, I was waiting for him to fall off his chair. He didn't. There was very little reaction to it. I think he was actually expecting a number equal to or greater than what that was. Yeah, $500 million.
This is a cheap bridge for a Columbia River Bridge. You know, you can spend that much or twice that much,
Especially
just looking
when-
at what's going on down in Portland.
Well, that one's 4.5, 5 billion.
That's what I'm saying. It's heck, this is kind of a,
And he does understand the
Diorama
quicker we can get it done, the cheaper it's gonna be because inflation's taken off. So we've got it in the plan to go do a toll study. And it's gonna be several options looking at it.
That's what it's all about, toll tolerance. You know, what are people willing to pay?
Well, 0 is good. We can get it. So that's the one piece I want to talk about with regard to the bridge.
Could I hit you one more time on that one? You've got, so all the revenue from the bridge, you've got forecast to come in to this account.
Correct.
Why don't we have 3 accounts?
No,
For
I'll
revenue.
show you one.
Okay.
This is a budget document, so you have to budget the way budget law tells you the budget. And then you can do, but your point is, where does that increase? That 350,000, where is that going? Well, that goes, and you'll see it under transfer out of the revenue fund into the bridge replacement.
I just think we got to be very careful with the public. You know, regardless, back in 2018, the public thought that part of this money was going to go to the new bridge. Well, it hasn't really been that way. Okay, so now we're going to say, well, now we have a replacement bridge fund. And it's got to be very transparent that that money is going right into that account and we can't spend it on something else. And I think we're still going to have a story of what happened to the previous one. Because people I know in the valley are just lined up to talk about that. So if you can show me how you're going to do that, that'd be appreciated.
I'll show you in a little bit. Let me go through the revenue fund. So, what we also have under the bridge is we have some interagencies and cascade locks and some also cable crossings. The rest of it, industrial properties, basically I budgeted what I'm forecasting in the 10-year model. Some of them went up, some of them went down a little bit. And when I looked at that between the 2 budget years, it has to do more with the actual cost, which is being incurred this year. So that's why I'm budgeting a little lower, a little higher based on the building, the assets. So anyway, that's where all that money comes down. If you're like a Halyard building and you're under a new lease agreement, then you only have 1 line item. If you're like the timber incubator and you're under the old lease structure, then it shows that, you know, you're reimbursing us for utilities and property taxes. So all the way down, there's nothing abnormal here until we get to the waterfront. And then here under the waterfront is that $1 million grant we talked about in CIP. That's at the IOF and also the ARPA funding there. Recreation, I'm looking at where we are right now, really at the end of March. And so I'm factoring in, we've got some heavy months coming in, April, May, June. So we should be able to make this budget for 2022-23. That's if activity is like the same activity for 2022. Same thing for the Hope, the Spit, Nichols, and the Marina Park. Marina, I want to talk a little bit about that. What I have in here is the COLA. I do not have 10% or 12%. I have just the COLA, the 6.2%, 6.2, 6.3% rounded in here. So if the board says, hey, I want it to be more than that, then they have the capability. Remember, your feet aren't held to the fire on the resource side of the budget. They are held to the fire on the expenditure side. Same thing for the airport. I just have the COLA in here. I don't have, as far as an increase, I don't have a true 10% or 12%. I do have the grant money. And so we end the year with about 23.6 or $23.7 million in the revenue fund. To touch base with your question, Commissioner Fox, I'm going to go to the bridge replacement fund. This is where I want to answer your question immediately. So under the bridge replacement fund.
What page are you on?
Oh, I'm on page 27. So it starts the year on page 27. You see the beginning funding balance is about $4.9 million. This reflects that ARPA grant. We're going to get the full $5 million. We'll maybe burn some change there between that when we get it and by the end of June. So I start the year with about 4.9 million, and that's ARPA money. And then we have some interest income, and then I show the grant from the state of Washington and the grant for the bill grant. And then you have a transfer of $350,000 for the toll increase that comes from the revenue fund. Likewise, remember, this is a resource side of, so this is a resource to the bridge replacement fund. On the revenue fund, it's an expenditure. So that's how the budget, you don't separate you with another account. You actually have to transfer funds to another account under the transfer category of the budget. And then we get into expenditures.
Fred, sorry to interrupt, but so the assumption there, you put a round number of $350,000, which is essentially 5 months, potentially 5 months of revenue.
I have about 6 months, but that's good. Yeah. And then here we have personal services. Most of this is some of Kevin's costs, but you also have the indirect costs coming in here with regard to, that personnel allocation that I showed you. You had, the bridge, which is the revenue fund, which is the largest piece that Commissioner Fox alluded to. But down at the bottom, we saw a percentage of some people that went to the bridge repair fund, and a percentage of some, not all, to the replacement fund. And so that's where this allocation resides. And then the rest of this budget is really represented by Kevin, and I hope he's still on the line, Kevin. So this is where Kevin, his budget, he said, we have some pieces what we're going to call administrative materials and services, like, phone services, travel lodging. And then we also have this component of professional services. And then Kevin broke it down into project management, NEPA, contract advisory, and so forth. And then he has this other component, which is capital outlay, which is really towards the project itself. 1.1 for project management and 3 million for the project engineering. Did I miss anything, Kevin?
Nope, I think the item to note is that the project management is split between capital outlay and materials and service. It's the same contractor.
Yeah, there's a piece that's good, it's expense, it can't be capitalized, so we have to put it over 10%. So that's the bridge replacement fund. I'll go to the bridge repair fund. And that is page 26, page 26.
So before we leave that page 27,
Oh, okay.
we talked about it a little bit earlier, and I'm not sure if this is the line item or not, but line item 20, travel and lodging.
Yeah,
Is that where?
Guess it's there.
we were just talking about that. What is that for?
Travel a lot.
That's travel and lodging, that is part of.
For who?
Okay,
Who gets to go there?
we had talked about more of the Washington trips.
Right.
That's over in the general fund.
Okay, that was the question we
All
were,
right.
we were just
We
talking
didn't
about.
know where that was
Is
going.
that
Hey,
the-
Kevin,
That's-
what is this 25 grand for in travel and lodging?
That's those are my reimbursable costs for when I travel up to Hood River.
Yeah, so when you actually relocate out here.
Nah.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
I'm working on it.
So that's
It's
Kevin's,
like 3
yeah.
minutes to 2. I've enjoyed sitting here on my gluteus maximus for 2 hours. I wonder if we might just take like a 3 to 5 minute break and relocate the blood back to the brain.
So you're the president of the.
Well, I just wanted to find a good, I was looking at the clock, I was gonna try to do it at 5:02, so we came back at 2 o'clock.
Okay,
How much
Sounds
time,
good.
how much do you have left in here? Just curious.
probably 20 minutes.
So let's take the break.
Let's
take a break.
Let's relocate the blood.
All right, over you get.
Thank you.
Whose idea was it?
Oh, I saw his chief.
They're trying to-
Some of this other stuff,
It's gonna have to.
all of this stuff.
I'm sure you don't miss this, Larry.
Contracts.
Yeah.
All the budget stuff when you were at.
I want to go through.
Of course, there is, you know.
Ours
10 times that, so.
Oh,
Why
fun.
it is.
What do you think?
Your surgery got rescheduled.
So I was around,
10 o'clock.
Portland Park.
saying, like, for taxes and deductions and
It's not like commercial.
Fundamental to the CFO.
I'm just trying to figure out
Team hangers
wording
downtown. You
would
pay a lot
allude
more
that
money.
they're a management
story
function.
of
Is there?
Yeah, but the
Wanna
story
pay
of
person
life
or
at
more of a-
airports,
Since the
the
commission
airports
chair
are
takes
not,
the seat,
Supplemental
we get back to
resource.
the
the
meeting.
airports don't. It's
I don't know
where the old guy sits next to
me. But that's the only thing.
It's kind of a.
Just trying to catch Ben, because I gotta go back and tell him and see. Same thing, just kind of temper that a little bit.
I just don't know a better way to word it, so it doesn't seem like he's, that they're overseeing it.
I think we get a lot of grants in this private money.
Like the way you explain it.
Okay,
works well.
I'm ready.
Of course, they're gonna be heavily involved.
Because there's no way to come out of it.
Just to
It's
sit
not
out.
there.
Participating
We're gonna do it this year.
They can put that.
because of all of the tax and payroll tax that they're doing.
Yeah.
All right.
It's just fundamental, if they don't have to be the one that's.
Yeah. You agree with that?
So,
Jensen needs comments.
When business out there, not going anywhere.
Actually, the only thing,
Well.
There's gotta be no.
Hey, President, can we get started?
I'm waiting for the chair of the commission to sit down.
Wow.
Staff to get that.
It's just too talkative, that's all.
The next break, I'll remind you.
All right. So I think I can get done in the next 20 minutes. How's that sound? Okay, so if you turn to, we're gonna turn to page 26. Page 26. This is the bridge repair fund. Renamed from the bridge repair fund. So what we have is a beginning fund balance that has occurred throughout the years of about 2.9 million. We have some interest income. And then here, the next line is where I do my best, but we chew this up every year after, probably in August or September, when I look back at the last fiscal year. But this is what we're budgeting, what we think is the actual bridge tolls. And from prior to 2018 and for 2018. And with, like I said before, for the revenue fund and for the bridge replacement fund, that allocation, there's an allocation of the bridge repair fund, and that indirect cost is reflected here on lines 15 and 16 for personal services. And then we also have the items of materials and services for the bridge repair fund. Largest piece is this. This largest piece is professional services. We have $50,000 for our Kaufman, our engineering, $15,000 for repair cap, bearing, greasing. We're analyzing the rub rails, lubing the ropes. We have an electrical contractor on call, and about $20,000. So that's what makes up the M&S component. And then here, like we had talked about when we talked about the CIP, here you have all that CIP listed, and it was 2.4 million or 2,475,000. That's sitting over in that CIP, that page, whatever, 31 or whatever it was. You'll see all these costs, but they amounted to $2.4 million. $1.6 million of that 2.4 is the road replacements for the lift span. That is the bridge repair fund. I want to now go to our last fund, although sometimes it's our first fund. It's the general fund, and it is on page 13 and 14.
Before you jump to that page, on page 26, you've got an item here, $1,000 for insurance,
Yes,
and that's not that's expenditure. So what does that insurance cover?
so part of that, our overall bridge insurance, major portion of it sitting over in the bridge for the revenue fund. It's a small component related to the bridge repair fund that gets allocated.
But where do we pay for the majority of the liability using the bridge and whatnot? Where is that insurance shown?
That's over on the revenue side. Revenue fund side,
As an expenditure of the revenue fund.
correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So for the general fund, again, we estimate what the beginning fund balance would be or cash on hand. I estimated based on Brian Beebe's comment, what our property taxes is gonna be about 88,500. It'll be close, it'll be within $1,000. We got about 2,000 of grant, I estimate. That's more of a placeholder. And then we get into the personal services, which we have all the indirect costs that I talked about earlier. We've always had in our budget for several years now, about 35,000. We call it community service initiative, but it's really interns that we hire for different types of projects throughout the port. And then for the general fund, we have these costs, office lease, utilities, maintenance, travel. There's a $32,000 that is in place for our board and some staff to go back and forth, travel anywhere. And so this is the point you're making.
Commissioner Fox, how many people do you think out of the Bi-State Committee would be influential enough? Do you think the number is 5 or 6?
Yeah.
Well, we could certainly do that. I would say
Good too.
mayor on either side,
Yeah.
county commissioner on either side. Yeah. 4 or 5.
I don't remember what it costs us to go back.
You mean PWA type trip?
Yeah. Like hotel. I mean, it's not. I remember the first time I went back there, they give me
You're talking
$25.
45,000 a piece.
Yeah, it's not inexpensive. I mean, those hotels are $400 or $500 a night.
Say 6. With more than one person.
Six per person.
No, total. So we typically would take 2 or 3 to get back.
I guess your point is you want maybe to bump up the travel just in case.
Yeah, they're placeholders, so it's better to have it there so you don't have to go.
25.
Right.
50
It's
would make
just
a
a
lot more
budget.
sense.
50 would make a lot more
50
sense.
grand.
You don't have to spend it, but it's there.
Okay, I'll bump it up to 50. That should be plenty for you
Move
guys.
some money from car chargers over to that one.
There you go.
So the rest of it, dues and membership,
Somebody said
insurance,
50.
it's pretty much the same from prior years.
I have a question on that, if you don't mind. On the dues and memberships, I noticed the One Gorge dues doubling. What's the reason for that subscription to double?
We went from 2,500 to 5,000.
Stay the same, unless you were thinking, because we hadn't gotten an invoice yet, and this year, you might have been thinking that it was not gonna get invoiced until July, so.
Yeah.
But that's, invoice is not at the chamber,
Was it gonna be 5,000 or 2,500?
2,500.
Don't put it right in line with last year's. That's fine.
So what that fund, we pay 2,500, Port Academy Lodge pays 2,500, and we're always trying to solicit other donations.
Right.
BNSF has also contributed
Isn't that the
around
general fund? That has nothing to do
$500,000
with bridge replacement.
and that helps to pay for those
Good question.
state receptions that we.
Oh, yeah.
during the legislative.
Oh, I was just wondering why it doubled, because I know that if we didn't double
It
the
doesn't need to double.
energy council, we would have to explain why we were doubling.
We don't need to double it. I think that's because we just haven't gotten our bill yet.
Oh,
from
perfect.
Ron Adams for this
Yeah,
fiscal
look at-
year,
look at
but
what
I
years
can
ago.
make sure that happens.
I can make an adjustment.
Yeah.
That's only 25.
That's easy, okay.
With regard to our lodging, we're keeping our lodging the way it was for last year. So that it's split between federal and state, so federal about 96,000, and then we split between Washington and Oregon. And it's not an even split, it's not like 60-60, it's like, it's a little different. But we're keeping the same budget as we did from last year. The rest of it's about the same, whether it's accounting or newsletter, it's gone up a little bit. And the rest of the budget's about the same. So that is what is the general fund. Any questions? And I'm gonna go to the last piece of our budget. And That's the
Just
last
to be clear,
page.
you saw that it's 10,000 for the.
We've got one question on page 14, under professional services. It's quite an increase from last year. It looks like it's in two components. One is a 65,000 financial plan and a 20,000 on recruitment. What was the, remind me again, what's the financial plan in here?
So the 65, we're looking at page 14. We're looking towards the bottom of the professional services. And you're right, there's $65,000 of financial planning. That had to do coming out of spring planning. That had to do with taking a look and changing the modeling for the bridge replacement. Instead of a 10-year financial plan, have a separate modeling for them. That came out. So I'm just reading the minutes and I'm putting that in the budget.
Give me a contract, I'll do it for 55,000.
And then,
Buy everybody.
and then for the, we had about 10,000 for recruitment effort, and that had to do, 20,000 for recruitment, that had to do with HR, salary,
Salary study.
study, and also some money for recruitment efforts. So the last piece I'll talk about is our last item. I'll turn it over to our president. Our last page is page 37, and that's what you see here. It's basically taking a look at everything we have. Not breaking it down by fund, just taking it all, saying, hey, I have a bridge, I have all these asset centers. And so the last page, page 37. And so what I do is I plug in all the revenues, I plug in all the personal services, plug in all the material services. Then I come up with a number that's net revenue before capital outlay. That's an important number. And the reason for that is because we're so capital driven. It's nice to see how much positive cash flow we do have before we look at capital. The next column is other sources, and that's mostly grants. Then capital outlay, that's going to hit this year, and any debt service. And so if you look at just the revenue fund, if you drop your finger down to where it says revenue fund, we have about $1.6 million of net revenue after capital and debt, but that's just the revenue. So if I add in the general fund, the repair fund, bridge repair fund, the bridge replacement fund, I drop down to about $2.2 million in the red. And that's due to capital, and that's nothing new. We know that capital in this next fiscal year, $1.6 million of that 2.2 is water roads. And it's not happening. So I just wanted to give you, how does it look overall? This is the picture of how it looks overall. And that is what I have.
It's two more questions for you on this particular page. When we look at debt service over at the Marina, 93,000 this year. How much more do we have before they're paid off?
Well, the final payment is 2028.
2028?
Correct.
Same thing
Part of that
for
peels
them.
off next year. The Marina dock, the boathouse dock, and it's electric.
Yeah, but yes and no. No, it's not.
Doesn't-
So what happened was when we issued in 2013, we issued Marina debt. There was two components of that. There was the electrical work and there was the dock for the, what we call the boathouse dock. So we gave the boathouse people a higher amount because they're paying for this. Why should we, Marina, pay for your boathouse dock? But what happened was the boathouse dock still benefits from this electrical upgrade. So they had both components. What you're talking about is We do a final assessment, January 2023 of both. But after that, the boathouse dock people, they basically don't have to pay the assessment. Because we've gained that part of their payments over time. But we still have this Marina
Yeah,
electrical.
no, I knew that. That
Okay,
explains
I just wanted to make sure, yeah.
Hey, thank you. And the other one is on the Jensen building, the 158. When does that get paid off?
Oh,
It's somewhere in the-
2031,
Yeah, somewhere in the-
2031, yeah, because we did it in 2021, we refinanced it.
Right, I'd like to, came up with this very creative idea to develop a tolling system here that can be applied to other tolling bridges. And I assume that the number that's in here is for Cascade Lock. It can take like a couple of minutes. And I'm sure the commission probably knows. What is the status of that as you're working? Was that still as a viable profit center for the court? Just to pursue those, that tolling contract with bridges in the future in the Northwest?
I believe so, I think it's still valid.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of a critical mass I can get. I was right on the cusp of getting Clackamas County, I mean, just right on the cusp. They have the Bull Run Bridge, and they're still looking for takers. The only reason why Clackamas County hasn't pulled the trigger and come to us more was because the city of Portland backed away and said, well, we may help you out more with the direct infusion, because it's the city of Portland's water bureau trucks that weigh more than what the bridge can hold if it gets derated. And that was what Clackamas County was worried about. Just like ODOT comes and looks at our bridge, it looks at the Bull Run Bridge, and there is a high probability it would get derated. And now the city of Portland water trucks can't get over it. They're not allowed to. So that's what was happening. They needed some capital, and that was one of the ways they were looking at it.
So as you depart, how does the court stay tuned into that opportunity and try to influence?
Yeah, well, I would hope my replacement takes a conservative role. We have this opportunity, even today, there is no one. I mean, people say ODOT's nowhere. They are nowhere. I mean, they're gonna build an I-5 bridge, and yet they're coming to us to work on the programming that we've already put in place.
And it's
To
about
work with DMV, the whole put a hold on someone's registration that they didn't pay their toll. So they're cookbooking off of us. They're still behind. They're way behind this. So we are in a very advantageous driver's seat. If someone wants to take this and move it forward, they can move it forward easily. Just to give you an idea, the Golden Gate Bridge, P Square basically got the contract for the Golden Gate Bridge. And their system today, it's not exact, but it's, there's a lot of functionality necessary. It doesn't look like ours, but the functionality is very similar to ours.
And there's some of us that are really goosey about doing that.
Oh, yeah. What's the
And the
concern?
reason that I'm kind of goosey on it, not saying that we wouldn't do it, but the liability concern, number one. Number two, our real ability on the ground to support a problem. When you got 100,000 cars going across the Golden Gate Bridge a day.
Right.
And all of a sudden the system goes down and they're letting cars go through, who's got the liability on the software?
Yep.
And it wouldn't take very much to sink us as a port.
Now, Peter,
Plus the fact we're not a software development entity.
Well,
We
So-
take tolls on a bridge.
I'd like to interject.
Go.
That's not our market. Big operations, Golden Gate, the I-5, bridge, never been our market, never has been our market. Our market, the Bull Run Bridge. Our markets, the new grids that they want to build over Canby, instead of using the ferry at Canby, they want to build a bridge. That's our market. Our market's a small to medium-sized market.
So what's that? Is that like 4 to 10 million cars a year?
Yes, yeah.
So
So,
because I was thinking, as you were talking, I said, okay, well, so what are the solutions in here? I mean, the POS system I have, we basically signed an agreement that if something happens to the POS system, we can't go back to the POS company and say you owe us for this downtime. I mean, it's just you bite the bullet for the best software you can buy. But what I was thinking was just like you have a maintenance department, or marinas have their harbor masters and the harbor master crew. Is it possible? I mean, I went so far as to say, could we create a legislative approach where it's a rural initiative where these smaller bridges, 4 million to 10 million, this is where you're going to go. This is who's going to provide the service. And so just like your maintenance department, you have something set up here that this is what they do.
See, I'm not against it. I would like to see a real business plan, to see the real potential there, realizing we're not software developers. We're not changing the program. We just manage the program. We implement a program. Now, that's a lot different than the guys behind the scenes
doing the algorithms.
Exactly.
well, we're not programmers, but we're designers. I helped design the system. What you see in this design is stuff that I've learned from other entities. I went across the Golden Gate Bridge. I went out there. I went across the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. So I went there to learn. And so I said, well, I look at different programming, and I came up with those business rules. So no, I'm not a programmer to some extent, to a large extent. But I do understand it.
Yeah, but you're going away, my friend.
Okay.
But I don't see another.
Well, your new contract that you're gonna be talking about later does speculate that there will be some availability thereafter.
I just want to see a business plan.
Yeah, you just need to have a big enough crankbait. So that's all you need.
Oh, okay. All right, anyway.
I got a question too, if we're just popping questions at you. What's the remind me, the $300,000 capital expenditure on Maritime? What's that for?
That's a storm line.
You already answered that. Okay, that's what's confusing me. Okay.
So I have, just for your information. So number one, modifications to this budget. The $50,000 charging station, we're gonna give it to Heaton. We're gonna reduce on dues, one gorge to 2,500. And then we're going to, and then we're gonna increase the travel budget up to 50,000. Those are the modifications.
Everybody good with that? I think he's covered it.
Yes. Now it's time to deliberate. If there is any.
I don't know if there's any deliberation.
This is up to you guys. This is your deliberation. Then you
Well,
make
I'll tell you
recommendations.
what, for the benefit of the budget committee, let me look back at Larry. Do you have any observations, comments, input?
Just a general one that my biggest concern for the last few years has been what happens with the organization after the completion of construction and is operating on its own, and there's no more fees and the rest, but we have this portfolio of public obligations that we've assumed that none of them are cost neutral. They all have to be fed on an annual basis, and we will have revenue to support those. So I think part of a financial plan for the future should be, how do we transition, if it's a 5-year window or 4, whatever, how do we begin to transition the way we look at things so that the expenditures become an investment in something that's going to be cost neutral for us or for the community anyway, whatever the activity is. So I worry about people looking at the funds that we have and the revenue streams and saying, well, I want a part of that, and I want a part of this, but we're the we're the port and we're taxpayer supported. And we got a bridge to maintain until such time as it's gone. So, how do we preserve our resources and limit them being pulled away to support other things that nobody else wants to spend any money on? And how do we begin to reduce and make self-sufficient the airport? Why should we be subsidizing the airport and general aviation? I mean, it's like the Tesla, it's what the Tesla's there. We should be looking at a way to keep going after the capital funds and maybe get some support administratively and the rest, but it shouldn't be a pull on the general fund such as it is or will be in the future. Otherwise it'll bleed to death and there won't be anybody here any longer to answer phone calls.
Larry, let me answer that on behalf of the commission, because that's something we've been working on a lot. We're right in the middle of it, and you're exactly right. This is why you're seeing some of the studies that we were asking you guys to approve, because we do want to get active in generating new revenue sources. We have about a 7 to 10 year window.
Sure. Yes.
That we need to replace as much of net $4 million as we can, which hopefully is going away. And so we are actively working on that. And you're exactly right.
No, I know we've been talking about that for a long time, but now it's kind of we're in the crunch.
We're doing it now.
We're in the real crunch.
Cliff is right there.
You see the clip.
Okay, Larry,
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'm almost concerned about the airport, of course, because everybody thinks the airport costs so much money. I understand that. I do think the airport does a huge service for the community. It's not recognized. You look at, I mean, if I had my way, I think the county, I think the city, I think everybody ought to be helping pay for it. It shouldn't be the port's responsibility in a sense. And I don't think it should just be, I'm not sure. Airports don't make money. And it's not only, I don't know, you've been to some of these airport meetings or some of you guys, airports cost communities. They're like a library. They don't make money. They are a service. I mean, so there's a certain amount. How do we justify that? When we got fires and we got helicopters in and we got the ambulances coming in and people complain about noise, but it's their son being saved or their father going to life. I mean, I look at this and they want the service, but then nobody wants to think about what the expenses to maintain that thing. And I think when a hangar's built, whoever puts that, that's why I really like to see private industry rent some land, let them go build their hangar. See, they can go build a $2 million hangar and they don't care what it costs is what they want. But if we build a $2 million hangar, we aren't going to get the rent for it. I mean, nobody's going to pay for that. But some company might do it because they've got it, but they're going to have a long enough term lease to make that justified. Now, whether big debate that goes on in airports all the time, is 30 years enough to write it off? It really isn't anymore, not with what the costs are. So that's my big concern is everybody keeps putting this cost back on the airport. It's kind of like the down here at the port. I mean, it's kind of a service. I mean, it doesn't really pay for itself in a sense, but look what it does for the city, look what it does for the county, look what it does for the tourists, the hotels. That's what I'm concerned about. Anyway, I don't know how to figure that out. Except if I had my way, I'd bill everybody for their services. I mean, I'd make the county pay theirs and the city pay theirs and whatever. But somehow they don't want to pay it. That's my concern.
thanks, Judy. John?
Well, it turns out, I think, that people in small businesses like this think they're the only ones there. And they have a tendency not to look out and ask somebody else questions. So I don't think there's anything going on here that's reinventing a wheel. Okay, somebody else did it, probably doing it right now. The thing is that you want to get in touch with those folks and find out what the hell they did to do it right. So you find somebody that's doing it right with an airport or 2 or 3 and find out what they did. And you can learn a whole lot and it doesn't cost you anything to do it because they'll tell you what they were doing. Okay, a good example is you can go up to Spokane and look at the old airport up there, who was just a complete disaster 20 years ago. And they straightened themselves right out. Okay, so you just need to go ask how they did that, or you can
Aurora's the same way. Aurora did the same thing from an airport that went, it's the same kind of thing.
I think Aurora's an 80-acre airport too.
I mean, it's amazing what they've done, but they leased out rent, I mean, they leased out land, they let people put hangars up, there's, I mean, it's active. It's amazing what's going on, of course, and they had their complaints of noises and they have to, you know, everybody does. I mean, we're not different in that respect. You know, every airport, look at Portland for years. The only thing is now the jets get pretty high compared to what the old, look back when C-47s flew out at a low angle over the top of town, and now a jet is way high. He's noisy, but he's high. I don't know. I think there's gotta be a way of doing it though. And I think other airports have done it. Some of them are really struggling, but some of them have developed the land around it, become for industrial use. I mean, I wish the port had a little more land than what it has. It's not near enough space. That should be industrial. Look what's happened down Tucker Road right now. That whole Windmaster Corner is almost down to the airport. I mean, that's all going industrial. You know, it should be. Everybody along there's got a little business. Things are happening. And that whole thing could be like an industrial area in there. We just need the farmers to give up their orchards over there and get EFU out of there.
Nothing I've grown that makes it any kind of sense.
So I don't know, how do we make that into an area that is something?
Okay, one of the things the state of Oregon did was they designated counties that went through several hoops could have certain chunks of ground, 50 acres or something like that, out of their EFU business and into some other industrial zone or another zone that they needed. We don't have any industrial zone here left, really, Mouse Hill Beach or commercial that's outside of the little circle around town here. And I've never been in favor of the circle around the city crap to start with, but what may be something that's possible to do is to convince the state of Oregon that they can do something like designate 50 acres around each of these airports that's been upgraded and is a good looking airport as ground that you can do other stuff with and make AD zone. You can make an AD zone of 50 acres around that airport out there and you will not even believe what's going to happen. So it may turn out that going to the state and saying, okay, great, why don't we pass a little rule here for a bunch of different airports to be able to do that? I mean, they seem to be pretty hard pressed to give up, you know, 50 acres of ground out here in the EFU zone. And we got 93,000 square miles. And we're using 3% of it for town. And we aren't, you know, using a whole bunch of the rest of it for anything at all. So that may be a really good way to point. I don't know exactly how to do that, but you know, you can write your own legislation pretty easily around airports. The AD zone is a zone that's got 47 things in it, and they were kind of all added individually by people who wanted to do something. And I think that that's how you approach that.
I think you guys should both come chat with us after we have our study done at the airport and we talk policy.
Good.
Well,
I'm gonna be a little windy here.
Becca.
Oh, there's
No,
a bunch
no.
of people up there.
Uh-huh.
Becca?
No, I don't have any. I had one source of confusion, but I think I can leave it because I don't think I'm looking for an answer.
This is your moment. You're on the
Well,
big
I'll
stage.
tell you what I couldn't piece together as a community member that's kind of half tracking is whether or not going to all electronic tolling is an economic winner. Like when like sort of at the end of the day, and I hear there's sort of like all of these, and I mean on the current bridge. So there's this like $85,000 sign, and then there's these like staffing costs over here, and there's concerns about, you know, whether or not it would work, et cetera, and ask for a business plan. But I don't understand, at the end of the day, if you move to that, does that save a bunch of money that could be going into the bridge replacement fund? Because the current system of live toll is more expensive than that would be. And I don't know that, I mean, I don't think I need an answer to it, but it's sort of maybe something that somebody else is already looking at or pursuing or thinking about or whatever.
Well, I've actually looked at that. So, but you're right. If you look at the economic impact to the community, because you have these jobs, then that does play a role if you do away with those jobs. But you wouldn't do
Right.
away with all those jobs.
Right.
Because basically you need When you go to all electronic tolling, you have to have staff or you have to have somebody to actually validate the license plate. Because certain license plates, they validate immediately and sometimes they don't. You know, a B and an 8 look alike, an O and a 0 look alike. So
Right.
you have to have a human eye. So you have to have staff to look at stuff like that. But you're right, at the end of the day,
It's an economic winner.
there are some cash savings, but is it an economic benefit to the community? And that's where I would have to, I really have a trouble with, because I think there's more economic benefit to the community by having Procola.
By having,
If you're
by having it
talking about-
staffed because of the
Yeah.
job loss.
Correct, correct.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're talking about the new bridge, I can tell you with certainty, we haven't made any decisions regarding what the toll's gonna look like, or
Yeah,
even
I
if
was-
we're gonna have a toll.
Right. I was talking about
Hopefully, we
the
don't
old-
even have a toll, but it's way early, and we're keeping a really open mind here.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I had tunnel vision on the piggy bank thing. So I guess that's why it's not being moved forward, is because it's sort of like these, different factors in terms of, piggy bank wise, it's a winner, but there's all of these other losses that are, on the table. So that's why it's not kind of, people aren't moving forward on it. That makes sense. That's helpful. Yep.
Okay, any other questions for the big screen? Okay, well, this is my moment to finish up. And there's always big thank yous, certainly to Fred and port staff. I know this is like writing a very large federal grant with lots of detail across factors that have to balance out. And to the commission, I applaud you for your visioning. Okay, that's evident in the budget. You're looking ahead to see how to resolve the deficit that will occur sometime in the near future with the replacement of the bridge. That makes me feel good as a constituent. There are some land use issues that you've got to deal with and some building issues, but they're all displayed in the budget. So, sustaining the port is always the main priority. And then the other is your entrepreneurial side. What are you looking for? Where's the community going as a whole? Where's our food industry going? Where's the technology industry going? Where's the tourism going? Where are the different groups like the downtown business group and the Heights are going? As I read the strategic plan, if I got it right, there's about close to 700 people that are employed on port properties, which means that just about 1 in 10 people that walk around the street that are residents of the city are affected by what and how you operate this port. So it's a huge contributor to this community. The grants, this must be your largest grant of all time here. I mean, I haven't said this to you guys as commissioners, but I always thought we should have a small little group and they're professionally paid and that's all they do. I mean, they're just totally focused with professional skill sets to go after all these different funding sources that are available to us. I've just gotten started in the Department of Agriculture funding. It's just a bucket of money. You just have to have a coalition build, project idea in place, where you're going to put the idea, and they write checks. So, you're 75, 90 million to the bridge. And then I saw another $6 million for land improvements. I do have some concerns for lot 1 in terms of the labor force, cost of housing, how you're going to feed into that. As a business owner downtown, the average age of our employees is 60. So they're not working full time, but they're working that 2 or 3 days that keeps them happy and engaged, and then they're gone, and then you have to deal with their vacation time. So I know it's while we get our way through this pandemic, and it's going to be probably 3 to 5 years before we really know what the working population is going to be like around here. So I caution you about commercial developments that require a lot of employment, that need housing. I heard there's a change in the CEO over at In Situ, but they are actually turning their focus inwards towards the high school and the college kids that are being raised around here, and starting to make investments there, so that's who they're targeting as their future employment base. Those are just some of the things, but getting engaged with the port industry itself. Is there 30 ports in Oregon?
24.
24, there's 65 in Washington. So between the two of them, there's 90. So if you went in there and did a hard cut and said, well, where are the ports that have $4 to $10 million in operating income? That's who we want to go look at. Typically, they'll have an airport industrial property. So, if you run up against, like one of your questions, usually there's a port out there that's already gone through that wheel. And so you don't have to reinvent it. I've never met a port that hasn't been really cordial to commissioners and staff to go meet, talk, and work through solutions. Because I've never been to OPPA conference, but I imagine it's the same.
Very much so.
Yeah, WPPA's got their 3-day session going on in Skamania, and their airport, Marina, industrial properties, rule of law. Those, when you go sit down on one of those meetings, you're getting the best of the best, and it's like the least expensive consulting fee that you could ever ask for. So I encourage you to participate at that level. I don't cover just about everything. Fred, we are so gonna miss you.
Oh,
Well, one thing on the topic of missing Fred, we have been for a couple of years now, been working on sort of the pace of succession planning as upper management retires out and professional development for staff moving up to chief supervisory roles. That pathway, that timeline has been compressed and accelerated. And I just wanted to recommend maybe some of that car charging station money that's moved into travel can also, if there's anything left after that, reallocation into beefed up training budget for staff, professional development for issues that, we're dealing with now that we weren't expecting to deal with until 2-3 years from now. If there's a way to kind of beef up the ability to send some folks to some professional development training courses for new responsibilities so that the capabilities are matched with the responsibilities.
You always want to interrupt me, don't you?
No, I'm going to boost you.
She's really good in Washington DC. She just takes over the conversation. And I have a picture of her and Congressman Fazio, and they're sharing a beer together, and you'd think they were best buddies.
We are.
Yeah. No, you have a staff with an absolutely phenomenal network of contacts and relationships that are trusted. And that's the keynote. I know you're in a succession discussion now, and I didn't quite see anything in the budget that said, here's an allocation for the succession activity. But the value of a network is immeasurable. That when you sit down and talk with somebody, you don't have to sell yourself again. They already know who you are. They trust the Port of Hood River. They know you make good investments. You have good returns. You create the job. So that is probably the most important thing that you can sustain around here is that continuity. Those are the most successful ports. So having said that, and looking at where we're at, we've gone through deliberations. We've gone through, well, you have action items now.
you have 2 action items as a budget committee. So one is to make a motion to approve the top property tax levy. You can read it.
Yeah.
And then the other one's to approve the budget.
So this is budget committee members that are making this. So this is
So
something.
the board is part of the budget committee.
Yeah, it's a large.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion to item 6A?
I'll move that we approve the resolution increasing the levy for the next fiscal year as described in the agenda.
A second?
I'll second it.
First and a second? Oh golly, what's my protocol? Any further deliberations? Hearing none?
There you go.
Call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays?
And then
You might want to,
I'll get to the next one.
you may want to look at the screen.
Six
and-
B.
Yeah, we need to register votes from Hobie and Becca on that motion.
Did you raise your hand?
said aye.
Did he? And Becca, you're good? Okay. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
President Short,
That's fine.
there was a suggestion from Genevieve. Does the budget committee want to consider that as an addition to the list of changes?
The succession investment, the trading.
Trading, yeah.
I think you're still net minus about 10 or 12 grand after a couple changes you made to the proposed numbers. So I think there's probably money in there and you're still equal to what you started with.
Okay. Everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
I gotta look back at the TV set. I'm not used to this. Okay, will be good. Okay. So does that doesn't need a motion. That's just that.
Oh, it's on the, it'll be on the list because
Action
you're
item. Action item.
approving the budget with some changes.
Okay, so item 6B is moved to approve the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget as amended with additional action items. Do I have it first?
I move. Okay. No, JD.
The twins have moved it. John, I'll give it to you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Larry seconded it. So we have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Back at the TV set, okay?
Yeah.
You good?
Yeah, I,
All right. Any nays? Hearing none, the motion passes. Item 7, adjourn the budget committee and open regular session. I hate to do this. I'm having so much fun. We can hang here and eat cookies and eat sandwiches until 5. It's only not even 3 o'clock.
So
I
then,
could have talked a lot more.
You did a good job.
Great.
All right, so is there a motion to adjourn the budget committee and open the regular session?
I saw
All
you.
you gotta do is adjourn it. I'll open it in a little bit. And I'm not gonna open anything. Everybody got 10 minutes to chat.